but it says live. So my guess is we're live.
I guess so.
I don't have a notice that you're live.
I've got a little button that says live, and it's glowing. Live, live, live.
That's what I've got.
Yes, you are live.
Hey, we're live.
Right. Well, remember, I mean, there's whatever the delay is, so everything we just said hasn't gone out to the world yet, but it will.
It absolutely will. And you know, this was our very first try at this. LJ has found us, so that's encouraging.
Oh, I see both of you now.
And she sees both of us. So,
Hooray!
I see Stan with the sexy long COVID hair.
I'm gonna get this cut real soon.
Are you?
It's driving me nuts. You know what? I don't mind. I mean, this needs to be trimmed back a little, but I just don't like thick hair in the back and the sides. So that needs to get trimmed significantly, particularly if the weather's going to get hot.
So you're going to do a reverse mullet?
I was thinking about it. And in fact, I was thinking about it in those terms. I think I'm going for a reverse mullet. Business in the back, party in the front.
I mean, especially in the webcam era, there's something to be said for putting the party in front. When I created the fictional group, the Charcoal Burners, based on the real-world charcoal burners, one of the things, since they would go out into the woods and burn charcoal, as I mentioned, they all tended to have very tight, neat hair up front. They could put up a hood, so it was longer and back, and so people were like, okay, so they're wearing mullets. And I'm like, no, it's not a mullet.
Hello, Michael.
Hey, we had our first person pop in and say hi. And we got 4 people watching us, which I think is Michael and the 3 of us on the broadcast. But I will put this up later, presumably. So let's talk about what this is. This is what the what with Stan and Owen and LJ. And Stan and Owen are on screen, as is their wont, and LJ is off screen, as is her wantant.
Hello.
This is how everyone wanted to do this. And I am within lobbing distance of LJ, so she can get my attention if she wants it by lobbing something at me. She has just picked up a thing, so obviously I'm nervous.
She's armed and ready.
I have been lobbed at. And this is just a chat show.
Make me a lobbyist.
What? Yes, that does make you a lobbyist, because you lobbed something. The inspiration for this was that last year for Gen Con, Stan and I, late one night, did a lobby hangout online with no warning and no plan, and a surprising number of people showed up for it and watched it and hung out. And so that's what we're doing at the moment. This is a video hangout. Is the show going to evolve into something more than that? We have literally not discussed it. Because those discussions could be entertaining, and why on earth would we not broadcast entertaining discussions, right, even if they are, what are we doing with what the what? Even the name, what the what, could end up being temporary.
We could, yeah, no, we could talk about it, or we could turn that into a show.
Yeah, totally. So, show 0, like session 0, but for a show. What are we doing with this? And we may not answer that for a while. And Stan even did a What the What logo. Stan, you want to share your screen and pull that up? And if I'd given you more than 2 seconds of warning, you could have been ready for that, but I carefully refused to let any planning occur.
I might be able to. Let's see what happens when I
Hello, Peter.
do this.
Your name is in Arabic. I'm afraid I can't read that.
Google needs permission. Oh, well, no, apparently I can't.
I welcome you, though.
Of course not. Let's see. Can I do it? Watch something together. I could enter full screen. That's not helpful. All right. Well, we'll get that logo up at some point.
Trust us. There's a logo.
And it's great. It's a great looking logo. It's fantastic. Everyone will love it. It's huge.
Huge.
And, you know, one of the reasons I thought we should just broadcast this, I did nearly 50 episodes of the Demiplane of Gaming with my good friend Steve Russell, who's sadly no longer with us. And that just grew out of the fact that Steve and I would get together and talk online. And one day Steve said, there are people that would like to see this. And twice a week now, most weeks, except when I forget what day of the week it is, Stan and I have been chatting and hanging out through the pandemic. What would you say that we average like 3 times every 2 weeks?
I think at our best we average 3 times every 2 weeks. I think really we're averaging about once a week over the course of a month.
We're supposed to be doing this twice a week, and now 3 times a week with What's the What.
Right. Well, I think we might get closer to the twice a week average now that we're doing it 3 times a week.
And so right at the moment, we're going to be broadcasting starting around 4 o'clock Pacific time and on Tuesday, and that's flexible. Obviously, I don't want to do it on Thursday because I already have Thursdage, and that is the most Thursday forward video I want to be part of.
We could do it. You would be exhausted, and then we could start this.
Yeah, well, that was literally the plan at one point, and I was too exhausted. And I've got a regular meeting with industry folks on Wednesday, and I call my mom on Thursday, and I've got games Saturday. So, this is a lot like trying to. What?
My Mondays are completely booked, and my Tuesday earlier in the afternoon is no good. And same thing. This might be the only point in the week when we could make this happen.
Well, we could do it later on Tuesday. If it turns out that what people really want is some midnight pie with Stan and Owen, we can probably make that work. At least for East Coast.
I'm busy in the evening on Tuesdays.
Pie.
I'm busy starting at 9 p.m. your time and going until close to midnight your time. Maybe a little later. So
hey, I see we have a few more viewers. Pop in and say hello. Let us know who you are.
That's right.
Yeah, LJ is monitoring chat. So if you've got questions, if you have comments, if you've had a burning desire to ask Stan what was with turning Dragonlance into a card game, if you want to ask me why there are shots of the bottom of starships and Starships of the Galaxy, when that is not a particularly useful shot to know what a brand new starship looks like, come on and ask us. We are here. We're ready to believe you.
Yes, we're here. So we're going to be talking. So I guess let's start a little bit about talking about what this show might be. Right? Right. You and I, we both have a lot of game industry experience.
That's true.
We're doing all sorts of things. So we could talk, and we're still more or less plugged in and keeping abreast of what's going on. So we can talk about things that happened in our pasts, right? Our biggest overlaps are Wizards around the 3E era and just before, and third party in the last decade. Right? And plus our individual things. So those are ripe for discussions. But, we also have a lot of experience just kind of generally with licensing and adapting materials. And so stuff we haven't worked on.
And contracts.
We probably have thought about.
So let's talk briefly about what we're doing right now, just for people who aren't somehow familiar with us. So what?
We have a question. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, well, apparently we'll talk about who we are later. We have a question.
Christopher Cruz asks, that is a good question. Why are there bottom shots of the starships?
Why are there bottom shots of starships? Okay, so what it really boils down to is that game designers and game art directors.
Wait a minute.
What?
Oh, my apologies.
Oh, I was interrupted for no reason. Art directors and designers often have different opinions about what is good in a product. And I have had numerous art directors who are often brilliant people who make books beautiful and make tons of decisions I would never think of that I agree is absolutely the way to go. Will sometimes want to make a shot more dynamic or more diverse or more interesting. And so you will occasionally get the case where you're like, and this is when I went to the mat on for the original Starships of the Galaxy. We had a brand new starship, had never been illustrated before, and I put in an art order with all the references, and the art shot for it is people walking down the ramp from behind and beneath it. So you get a really good job of what the ramp looks like, and no idea what the starship looks like other than there's a ramp. And I thought that was a terrible choice, right? If you're doing a shot like that for the Millennium Falcon, everyone knows what the Millennium Falcon looks like. Slave One, there are a lot of Star Wars ships. There's plenty of data out there, especially nowadays. But this was our chance to define the look of this brand new starship, and we were only allowed to do a very few new starships in that book. But the art director very firmly felt that this was the most dynamic and interesting shot. And game companies, you know, they pay designers to design and they pay art directors to direct art. And they are no more going to take my word for it on an art question than they are going to listen to the art director when they say, hey, this +2 bonus ought to be +3. You can make your case, absolutely, and sometimes art changes. But ultimately, the art director is generally speaking the expert who is trusted to know what goes well in that book. Goodness knows I've had books that are gorgeous, gorgeous books that do things I wouldn't do, that are better for having done things I wouldn't do. So I may be salty about a few specific examples over the course of more than 20 years, but in general, I would not, for example, want to change any of the art decisions Sarah Robinson made about Starfinder, for example. It's a gorgeous book, it's a gorgeous line, and even in places where I wanted to go a different direction with things, I think she made the right call for the visual impact.
Hello, Jason. Hello, Jason.
We got two Jasons here.
Jason and Jason.
I checked the link, Mr. Klein, and it looks like it's working now. Thank you for letting me know.
So often when, particularly when you're dealing with large companies and graphics, there's a difference between art and graphics. The difference between you know this, Owen. I'm saying this so we can get a conversation.
No, I get it. I'm nodding to indicate I don't disagree with you.
Right, and so the art director is interested in the most dynamic piece of art, and really, it sounds like what you wanted was a graphic for that starship because we'd never seen it before, and you were hoping to fit a graphic into the piece of art, and the art director didn't feel like that was the best thing. And it might have been, depending on your point of view, it might have been best served to shift that over from an art piece to a graphic piece. But then you wind up with this weird budgetary thing where they say, we can't afford to give you another graphic. You can only have a piece of art. And you say, that makes no sense. And say, yeah, well, that's how it is.
And I think all the graphics in that book were dungeon morphs for starship deck design layout and combat graphics. So LG tells me we've got another question.
Yes, Jason Waltman. I think you're sort of already kind of answering this question, but this is a little more finesse in the question. What is the pitfall when the artist and the game designer don't see eye to eye?
What is the pitfall?
Yeah, when the artist and the game designer don't see eye to eye.
Or to put it in a different way, if you don't mind, how do you work through that? Does one trump the other?
So, in my experience, ultimately, that's why there are people with job titles like publisher or editor-in-chief or owner, right? Usually, neither the artist nor the game designer has any sort of veto power over the other one. They're supposed to work together and come to a consensus and do what's best for the product. That doesn't always happen. And so, like when I said, when I was saying I made my case, in that particular case, I made my case to the creative director for the Star Wars role-playing game at Wizards of the Coast, and he went with the artist, so I was outvoted.
Yeah, I would say that the smaller the company gets, the more it's fewer people involved, and it's just you having a conversation with someone. The larger the company gets, the more it's like, I mean, for example, I would imagine in this situation, right, you're the designer, you and the art director would have a conversation. If you disagreed with the art director, you would take it to your manager, who would then go to the art director's manager, and they would talk about it. And if they couldn't come to it, if your manager really agreed with you and the art director's manager really agreed with them, it would go up to the brand level, and it would go like that. Whereas in a small, even you start slicing companies moderately smaller, you just don't have that level of a bifurcation in job duties. So the more it comes down to you two have your conversation, and if you can't come to a resolution, it goes up to the next level. I think most companies are going to be 3 people.
And interestingly, one of the things that I was asked about when I was interviewed for that job at Wizards of the Coast was, so you're a designer and a piece of art comes back and it's wrong. And how do you handle that? And what? And my ultimate answer, right, was after I've talked to my manager and I've talked to the I guess I was assuming the vice president of RPG R&D at the time. If they still disagree with me, then I drop it, because I'm being paid to do a job, and that job includes my best faith effort to tell you why I think you're making a mistake. But after that, you are not paying me to make trouble, right? That's not what I'm here for. I'm not going to say take my name off the book or start a petition.org petition to change it. I'm being paid for a job. This is a job. And I only discovered later that those questions were specifically driven at me because at the time I was being interviewed, there was some sort of hullabaloo about a picture in the 3.0 Player's Handbook about a dragon biting the iconic fighter Regdar and whether or not he was dropping his weapon. And the artist consistently did not produce what the designers wanted in that shot. LJ says we've got another question.
So we have one question, and we have a comment that made me think of a question. You can do these in whatever order you prefer.
Okay.
Yep.
Jason Klein says, I can't pronounce that. Where is the Cyanoid's mouth from Alien Archive 4, or does it even have one? The other is that Jason Waltman was talking about the Great Undoing and the dark times, and I thought maybe the two of you could discuss a little bit about what has happened in the gaming industry during quarantine.
Yeah, and the Great Undoing is Star Wars specific. So let's start with where's the mouth on that critter from Alien Archive 4.
You can't even say it either.
I could probably mumble my way through it. I don't know. For a lot of creatures like that, I tend to just assume that it's either on the other side, in other words, we're illustrating the side that does not have the mouth, or that it is something that is not recognizable a mouth, which makes me think of the little mushroom people from Mom and Dad Save the Universe. For people who've seen that, they're cute little things. What?
Were you the designer for the Cyanoid?
No. But even if I was, I just would have done an art order note, and unless if it's a gibbering mouther, then the mouths need to be there. If it just hums, the gibbering hummer, which
no.
Yeah, no. Then when we talk briefly about the Great Undoing, and then we'll get to LJ's question about gaming in quarantine.
Okay.
Star Wars used to have all these different levels of continuity. And so there was this A-level continuity, which were things which had been in the big screen. Continuity. Right. And so the novels and a lot of the game stuff were part of what was called the expanded universe, which was saying, hey, this isn't big screen official, but it is officially Star Wars. When Disney bought Lucasfilm, they announced that all expanded universe is off. It is not continuity. I believe they've got a Legends logo or something for, tales from the Star Wars universe that aren't official to Star Wars up to that moment, except for the movies. And everything that Disney does after that is all hard, definite continuity. And there's a lot of stuff that's popular, like Thrawn and such, that they have brought back in one form or another. But there's also a lot of stuff like my suit of battle armor that I invented that wasn't continuity for a while, although apparently it may be now. I was just looking at a note regarding it. So That is what happened, and I get it. I get why Disney did that, because the most recent movies they did were not possible under the old continuity, and the old continuity starts 15 seconds after Jedi ends, right? That's with what is, in my opinion, not one of the best next stories. So they had a bunch of clutter, and rather than say, well, we're going to keep some of it, or we're going to set things 150 years later, and none of the characters you've ever heard of will matter.
Dustin Knight commented, Wikipedia explodes.
Yeah, Wikipedia. I'm a little jealous about Wikipedia. When I was writing Star Wars, there was no Wikipedia, and you had to buy the Encyclopedia of Star Wars, and you had to like it. Let's talk about the game industry during quarantine, Stan. We have a request for the game industry during quarantine.
All right. What about it?
Say something.
What about? I mean, it was weird,
sucked.
right? A lot of companies didn't just kind of didn't have to change because they didn't have offices, but the game industry was most affected by what happened to the game hobby.
Yeah. Well,
and the companies like you work for Green Ronin, and it certainly affected them significantly. But the industry as a whole, I don't know. I think that it certainly pushed more people to dive into digital gaming, playing online, streaming.
Virtual tabletops definitely saw an explosion in use.
Yeah, and that brought more people into looking at some of the digital products as well. So I think it might have pushed the development of that forward a year or two, maybe more, from where it would have developed anyway. But I don't know that the top of my head, I don't know that I think the pandemic has had that big an impact on the industry.
I mean, arguably the pandemic is why we are doing this stream right now, right? Because the pandemic led to virtual cons led to us doing our virtual broadcast, and that led to us saying, hey, we've been talking about this for years. Let's finally actually, even if we're doing it just on Facebook streaming to start, let's get on there and talk. I would argue that the same thing is going on like with Green Ronin streaming, right? That a lot of that grew out of the fact that there weren't physical cons, and so you had to do virtual cons, and that meant that if you wanted to get your message out there, you had to figure out how to broadcast. And I think that was also, like the virtual tabletops, pushed forward by several years.
Yeah, I say push it forward a couple of years, but that's that's not.
There's a lot of
certainly not nothing, but it's not a huge sea change.
A lot of money got sucked out of the industry, or rather not put into it.
Yeah.
Gary Avenger says, I met Owen because of the pandemic. I'm here because of the pandemic. So there, that just proves my point.
Also, I have a question for Jason Waltman. He says, hang on, come back. Rolling for Your Life and Owen Paradise. Now, are we trying to do a Gangsta Paradise thing? Or are you talking about the fact that Owen wants to be made into dice when he dies?
I suspect the latter, since there's an illustration of that Stan has done.
Okay.
And Brandon, yes, talk for my enjoyment, which we can do. But there also have been some huge printing and shipping and sales issues that have hurt companies quite badly. And I think a lot of companies are still reeling from those impacts. We just had virtual PaizoCon, not this weekend, but the one before. And one of the things they were mentioning is that they were about to have 6 issues of a adventure path come out all at once, because they've all been piling up on the warehouse. So that is 6 months.
That's a very good point, right? The things that companies and products and things that tie into games, to conventions, to actual live face-to-face meetings took a huge hit.
And that means that Paizo had to pay to have those written, pay to have art, pay to have them laid out and printed. And for 6 months, they haven't gotten any money back from that. And worse, you know that if you dump 6 adventures, 6 months worth of content out all at once, you're not going to sell as much of any of them because they're going to be people whose budgets just don't allow for it and don't come back to pick it up later. In fact, it would be super easy, though sad, for people to say, well, I'll just skip that one entirely and I'll pick up the first issue of the next one. So I'm convinced it's going to take a huge hit. So Dustin Knight says, who knew a shipping container shortage would be so impactful? And that's just part of it, right? There are also COVID-related restrictions on how many workers are available. There are COVID-related restrictions on how many inspectors are available. One of the major distributors of games in the United States just shut down for something like 6 weeks and took time after that to pay people. And a lot of those sales are just gone. And it is still the case in this industry that selling into the market, into game stores, gets you the most sales. That if you have, and I'm not talking about a one-off, but if you have a regular sales stream into the retail market, that gets you more sales than selling through Amazon or selling on your own website by a bunch. It's not a small difference. It's a huge difference.
Yeah.
And during the time that those stores were shut down, or that people weren't willing to go to them, or both, that's money that didn't come in. And if people were paying salaries and trying to get projects done and having things backloaded, that means that there is less money for risk. So companies are less likely, for example, to say, we don't normally do box sets of flick'em football style war games. It's never been tried before, but it's a neat idea. We'll give it a go. That's much, much riskier. And I don't see people doing it as much over the next several years while they try to recover.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. My brain is not hooked into thinking that way anymore. But anyone that is making their money off the physical sales in the game stores, they lost a bunch, and that money is not coming back. No one is going to make up for all the money they should have spent last year by spending twice as much this year.
And we saw that in the 2015.
Certainly not enough.
We saw that during the 2015 East Coast blizzard. The 2015 East Coast blizzard shut down gaming on the East Coast and gaming stores and getting out at all for like a month and a half, 2 months. And there was not a big bounce of sales anytime after that. That money was just gone. So, as Stan said, no one, right? There were some sales, there were some diehards trudging out there, but a lot of the money gets made because something comes out and it's new and people see new advertising about it and they go buy it, and then it goes and gets put on a shelf. And I think some of that, honestly, is because a lot of gaming material doesn't get used to game. I think there's a lot of gaming material that's bought and people read it and it gets put on shelves, or it's something that's an improvement or an option, but not necessary. Like, hey, I bought a new flip mat. Well, I may use that flip mat, but I don't need that flip mat. So if the timing isn't right for it, I'll just buy a different flip mat, or I'll draw it out, or I'll set up dominoes, whatever.
Yeah, gaming. I mean, we saw this. The industry has kind of been dealing with this since the tail end of second edition, when it suddenly became there's suddenly this so much stuff coming out that you couldn't have and process and use all of it. So then it became hobbyists began to realize that and said, well, I'm not going to buy stuff I'm not going to use, and I know there's more stuff coming next month that I want, so this is the rate at my rate of buying is equal to my speed of consumption. And just because again, to say this, to repeat what I said earlier, basically, just because they didn't buy it last year doesn't mean they can buy it and consume it this year. They still can only consume one book a month, or whatever their number is.
Whatever their number is.
1 month's worth of stuff a month. So if you miss them a month, only the ones with a ton of extra money are gonna do anything more than buy what they can consume in that month.
Right. LJ?
A couple of comments.
Okay.
Dustin Knight said there's big talk in the MTG collectors community adds to how this is going to affect long-term prices on short print 2020 products.
Oh, that's interesting. So he's talking here about Magic the Gathering. And obviously Magic the Gathering, Wizards of the Coast very much wants it to be called a trading card game. The most common title for it actually is a collectible card game as a category. And the point of a collectible card game is it's collectible. So if they've been doing short print runs because there wasn't as much demand, which makes sense, that could impact the value for those things. The flip side of that is that we might have the same thing as like in the 1990s where there were deluxe #1 issues of everything with foil covers and inserts and a free CD-ROM for AOL inside. And that since things looked collectible, a whole bunch of extra people bought them and kept them. And because more were bought and kept, their price stayed low to nothing. I said we had a couple of comments.
Yes, Gary Avenger says that when he bought D&D books, he bought them for races and subclasses, and if it didn't have those options, he didn't spend the money on it. So the less subclasses, the less likely he was to purchase.
Yeah, that presumably is for 5e products, since he's talking about subclasses specifically. But I saw a lot of that same thinking starting back in 3.0, right? Are there new feats and spells and prestige classes for 3.0 D&D? And if yes, I'll buy the book, and if no, I won't. And then, of course, third-party people started, and very much including me, started to see, hey, people will buy classes and feats and spells and crunchy bits. For no reason I'm aware of, Wes Schneider referred to those as jukes at Paizo. But the more tangible, crunchy, player-usable rule pieces are in a book, the more players want to buy it. And that, to a certain extent, connects to a truism in gaming, and I don't know if it remains true, and I don't know if anyone ever proved it, but the idea was that GM-facing books only sold to game masters, and only roughly 1 out of 4, 1 out of 5 people in the industry is a game master. So player-facing books sell more. There seems to be an exception to that for monsters, and whether that's because monsters are cool or whether it's because players buy monster books to memorize them so that they can cheat. Who knows? But
nobody we know would have done that.
But
Wow.
I do know that there are specifically game lines that have looked at that and done things such as Starfinder's Alien Anthologies include related equipment and related playable species and information for players in each Alien Archive book.
Yeah, well, but I mean that truism came out of a way to explain the existing sales patterns. Right? So
right.
The sales pattern, whether you tag those particular words on it, the thing is, adventures that were just adventures that only the DM would think sold less than stuff that had stuff that players would use in it.
But did we ever have a good study that says it was because only GMs buy adventures?
No. So I mean, really, that's I think that the weird thing is that I don't think we don't need that, right? We always need to prove our theories, but that's a theory that even if it's wrong for nomenclature, right? It
could be that adventures would sell just as well as player-facing material if they were more interesting to read and not play, so players would buy them to use them as novels, in which case the problem isn't that players don't want adventures, it's that they are not interacting with the material the way they are fantasizing about building a character, even if they can't use every option they buy for their
right. But I think that's where the analogy falls apart. Is I think that people that back in the day.
No, wait. When is back in the day for you?
I'm saying back in the 2nd edition to the 3rd edition day, before the first of the millennial boom. We've had 2 or 3 big booms in the last 20 years, but leading up to that, where that truism was coined, I think that it was true that people, if you were playing in a group, then as a player you didn't buy the adventures because you wanted to play in them. But if you didn't have a group, if you weren't playing regularly, or your DM wasn't interested in running Greyhawk, then as a player you would buy adventures to read them, just as you describe. But if you are playing in a Forgotten Realms campaign, then the DM, my DMs would always say, "Don't read this. I'm going to run it."
Yes, yeah. It does make me wonder if there is a market for adventures that reading them doesn't spoil the adventure. Right, like an adventure specifically designed, maybe even an adventure where we say, hey, players should have a copy of this adventure. So that all the handouts, all the maps, all of the illustrations you can flip to, and just be aware that when we say, hey, here's the town, here are things your GM might be doing with the town. They might be cultists, or they might be ghouls, or they might actually be, and actually specifically set it up so that players are marking what they learn in the books. Like if you're doing a mystery, have you found any of these clues? Okay, well then one of these things is probably true.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a setting book that has blanks in it.
Sure. Well, but I mean, you could do a full adventure.
Yeah. No, you could. I you know what? I'm all for if you actually have an idea as to how that might get put together, then we should talk about it. Maybe not on the air, but right now, that description, right, an adventure, if you take all that stuff out of it, it's not what people are paying for an adventure for. Right?
I do have an idea how it could be done, and so I'll put that on my list of things to look at in 2023. Yes, LJ.
So there are some follow-up comments to what you were talking about just now.
Okay.
Area Avenger said he always bought the player supplement books and some third-party monster books, not to memorize them, but to see more than orcs, ghouls, and goblins, etc.
Right.
Brandon, I know I've said your name before and I've misspelled it before, but
just say Brandon.
Brandon Verkens, perhaps. Anyway, he's not a GM, but he often buys adventures that he wants run for him. And Dustin was talking about you could just put in a CRX monster.
Yeah. Sure, you absolutely could, and you could even give more guidance than that, right? You could say, hey, here's a necromantic layer, and there should be a monster in the mausoleum and in where the marsh is seeping into the coffins, and over here in the woods where the necromancers are. And for this one, pick a marsh undead, and for this one, pick an urban undead, and for that one, pick any kind of undead because the necromancers will summon it up. I'm not sure that would be enough to do what I'm wanting to do, which is to specifically have the same book be a thing that the players want to buy and literally take notes in, like a blue book for the adventure, so that they're turning it into their journal. But
I mean,
that is one way that you can do some of that stuff.
I mean, the first thing my mind turns to in as far as that's concerned is have adventures which are kind of I wish I could remember what it is that I'm in my mind is comparing it to something. I just don't remember what the thing is. Where the first half of the book is setting material, and the second half, or not necessarily 50-50, but there's enough of it there that, I mean, don't some of the Paizo, the Pathfinder periodical things do that, where it's part adventure and part, or they used to do that?
So the Pathfinder adventure paths are interesting because each adventure path is about 2/3 actual adventure and about 1/3 articles. Articles like what you would have seen in Dragon and Dungeon Magazine, because these replace Dragon and Dungeon Magazine, if you go back to the origin of them. But those frequently aren't player-facing. Those are frequently only GM-facing. But they also had the player's book for each adventure path that would have a chunk, like 32 pages, of player content. That is, here's the setting, and here's what people know, and here are some traits specific for this game, et cetera, et cetera.
So, to segue to a different conversation, we have a business question for Stan.
Okay, business question for Stan.
Who, me?
Stan. Yes, from Jason Waltman. What is your advice when hiring an artist?
Get someone you like. What? I mean, it's you got to start.
Pretend someone has never hired an artist before and they want to, and you're sitting with them at the big bar on 2,
Right.
and they say,
So
how do you hire an artist?
Is figure out first before you start talking to artists. Figure out what your budget is, because that's going to be the earliest part of your decision. Once you find someone you want, the question will be, can you afford them? So you just need to know how much money you have or are willing to spend. Then you start looking at the artists whose work you like, and I would say start by contacting them, drop them a line, ask them if they if they have openings in their schedule and what their budgets are, and if either they don't have openings or their budget is beyond you very politely thank them and say, well, do you have any recommendation for someone who might fit this? These are my constraints. Do you recommend anyone? And take it like that. The other thing is to just constantly be going to artists' websites and to different portfolio websites and looking at new people and new pieces and just following up. And every time you see someone you like, write down their contact info. And when I've worked as a art director, I will often be proactive and just contact people ahead of time. Say, look, I don't have any work right now, but I'm working as the art director for Super Genius Games, and we often have things. This is what we usually pay. This is what the scheduling is like. We usually work quickly. So if you're available to do things where you take an assignment and turn it over the course of 3 weeks, then that's what we'll be doing. If you're interested in that, let's talk, because I'd like to put you in my Rolodex, or that was when there were Rolodexes. I'd like to keep you on my call list. And so you set up your bandwidth, your pool of artists, and then you know ahead of time, oh, this is coming in, this is going to have this much money, and it's this kind of thing. Well, artist A is good at animals but not machines, and artist B is really good at setting scenes, and so you've got choices and you can start shipping them around. If you're just starting from scratch and you need art right now, then I say find artists you like and start talking to them and asking for them to help point you in directions of people if they can't help you, because every artist has other artist friends who aren't as successful as them and are looking for work.
And if all else fails, go to Clipart.
Yeah, LJ says if all else fails, there is royalty-free stock art and clip art with rights for publication that you can turn to. And one of the things I'll note, if you're contacting an artist, let them know what you want to use the art for, because the price can be very different from, I want an illustration of my character, which I get to show people, but I don't have the right to publish it. Or I want a piece that I can use as a cover, but after I use it for a cover, I'm willing for you to use it for anything, you retain the copyright. To, I want all rights to this so no one else can ever use it for anything. And even then, usually, but you can put it in your portfolio. Right? Those are different art
also,
uses.
Yeah, there's a difference between I want to use it in the book and I want to use it on T-shirts.
Yeah.
Every extra thing you want to use it for, the artist should get paid some amount more for that extra use.
Gary Avenger specifically notes the TTRPG community on Twitter is full of artists, editors, streamers, and small creators. If you slide in, you'll see all sorts of young, up-and-coming artists as well as working professionals. And that has been my experience.
Yeah, and there's lots of communities like that on Facebook and Reddit and everywhere. So getting in there and looking for people who are announcing themselves is a good way to get going too.
So we're at 45 minutes past the hour. I think we should start doing some wrap up.
Yeah.
About what you want this to
This went pretty well.
Yeah, no, this went great. And this is sort of what I want this show to be. I want people to ask us questions, for us to opine, and possibly to give our thoughts on things like, hey, there's a new Marvel RPG coming out. If we have strong opinions on them, and or that's the way the conversation goes, and or no one asks us any questions. So be warned, if you don't tell us what you want to hear, you're going to hear something. If you do have a topic you'd like us to cover, I recommend dropping me an email at owen.stevens@gmail.com. You can also drop a line on my Facebook page, or presumably on Stan's Facebook page. And right now, the plan will continue to be to broadcast on Tuesday at 4 p.m. Pacific time. And we'll see how that goes. And if we need to change it around, we will. You know, we're just getting started on this. So, what are your opinions of the new Marvel RPG? Matt Forbeck knows what he's doing. I'm looking forward to it, and that is largely the extent of my opinions on the Marvel RPG. Stan?
I agree. We were having a good conversation because of the 5 or 6, depending on how you count, Marvel RPGs that are out there that have come out. 4 of them will have been either designed or significantly co-designed by members of my writing group.
Awesome.
So you should call yourself the Marvels instead of the Illiterates.
At this point, we might have to change the name.
You guys want to put some links to your individual stuffs up?
Yeah, let's put some links to our individual stuff up for people seeing this. And that will take me just a second. The main thing for me is you can find me at...
What LJ saying?
I just said you should put up links.
Okay.
To where you can find us. And I'm trying to figure out how to do that.
I'll work it out.
Okay. I've got owenkcstevens.com. That's my blog. You can find nearly anything of mine there. On Facebook, you can find me at facebook.com/OwenK.C.Stevens. I also have a Patreon, which you can find at patreon.com/OwenKCStevens. And I am on Twitter, which is twitter.com/Owen_Stevens. And if the question is, should I have tried to make those all uniform? The answer is yes, but this is where we are now.
Right. Well, almost all of my, in fact, I think all of my online presences center around StanX, STANNEX. You can go to stanx.com, which right now is in a bit of a hiccup. I wouldn't recommend going there. But you can. You know, it's not going away. It's just it needs to be cleaned up a bit. But
you also currently have a Patreon.
I do have a Patreon. The link's up there. Patreon.com/StanX. I have an Instagram, Instagram.com/StanX. I've got Twitter, which is twitter.com/StanX. And if you want to find me on Facebook, it's facebook.com/StanX.
See, that's how I should have done it. That's the smart way to do it. Once you know it's StanX, you can go to nearly anywhere, and the StanX is Stan.
I have to be careful now. For a long time, there was zero chance anyone would use that. But apparently, somewhere along the lines, some other meetings or groups or something have started using that. And there's, I forget what, maybe it was WhatsApp, one of the new ones I went to, and StanX was gone. I was like, who took that?
So this has been our first show of What the What. We're still not sure exactly what the what is, hence the name. Right. But right now you can depend on seeing us once a week, and we will take your questions and show you the pictures of our bookcases and opine.
Yes, we will. Oh boy, will we opine.
Any final thoughts, Stan?
Let's
try and make a thing. No, let's make a thing.
Well,
Give us your final thought that gets no rebuttal. It's the end of the show. You get a thought. I don't get to rebut it. Any one thought you want to put out there. And then I'll do the same thing. Any topic.
And my thought is this: I'm really happy with how this went, and I'm looking forward to doing more of them.
Just out of nowhere, my final thought is that I've seen a lot of people talk about the idea that the original Star Wars movies weren't actually all that good, and the people that are currently complaining about the quality of the prequel trilogy and the sequel trilogy and the spin-offs would not have had those complaints if the original Star Wars had come out now, that they're cutting the original Star Wars this huge amount of slack. And that's true to a certain extent, except that there was really nothing like Star Wars before Star Wars came out. So what made those original Star Wars films, that first trilogy, so special was that it established an entire genre. And yes, that was built off a lot of things from Burroughs and Heinlein and DC Comics, et cetera, et cetera. There's a bunch of stuff that they borrowed from, but there really hadn't been that kind of movie trilogy before. And so what they did was establish this new thing. And that is why I think it's reasonable to hold movies that come after that to a different standard, because we don't have to explain what a lightsaber is anymore. Everyone knows. So that is my random opinion to end the show.
I will not
and there is no rebuttal. But if you have a rebuttal, by all means, put it in the comments. We hope to see you again next week. And till then, this has been What the What with Owen and Stan.
And LJ.
And LJ.
Good night, folks.
Good night, folks.
Hey.